with mushrooms in this case, or LSD, what you're saying is that this becomes therapeutic in that it actually can change your wiring, but it can also change your disposition.
When we talk about things like anxiety or depression or a block within your creativity, usually we're kind of stuck in a certain pathway in the brain. When we're working with psychedelics like psilocybin or LSD, the regions of the brain are firing off, which really just means that we're more adaptable and receptive and open to making changes.
It's really just helping everybody feel comfortable to utilize this incredible medicine that's been around for eons and eons and eons, long before us, and utilize it to really elevate their own lives.
The horror stories that maybe we've heard of psychedelics and the hallucinations, the purpose of working with such a micro amount is so that you are fully still in control. You're fully present. In fact, I'm microdosing right now and I feel great.
Tiffany and Rachel, welcome to the Everyday Millionaire podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us. Excited to be here.
Okay, now I don't know who's going to take this question, but I have to lead into the question of, okay, so Tiffany and Rachel, you're on an elevator, somebody's at some conference, they get on the elevator and they go, so what do you guys do? What's your answer to that question? I mean, the bio never does justice. So what is it that you guys do?
Yeah, so I would say that I help people find freedom, bliss, and awakening. And really, on the surface level, we work with products company, but we are so much more than that. We are so much deeper than that. And essentially what we're really doing is we're helping people rewire their minds, expand their minds, open up them up to new awareness, new possibilities, helping people through PTSD, depression, anxiety, OCD. I mean, the list goes on. But we're doing that through working with products that have psychedelics. So specifically psilocybin and LSD.
Oh, so mushrooms and LSD.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Holy cow. Okay, well, I'm having flashbacks already. We'll get into that maybe a little bit later. So tell me a little bit about, because my experience with mushrooms was very extensive back many years ago when I was far younger. But, now we talk about microdosing on mushrooms, and I was always macrodosing. It was, a wholly, totally different story. Give me a little bit of the evolution of the days of, magic mushrooms and getting, high back in those days versus where things have evolved to, and the discovery of perhaps what microdosing can do.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a really well-known researcher in the psychedelic world. His name is James Fadiman. And he actually has played a significant role in driving microdosing forward into modern society today. So over the years, he had collected a lot of data on his patients, specifically on microdosing. And he created this amazing protocol that's called the James Fadiman protocol. And he was doing this for many, many years, excuse me, and decided to put his patients on a protocol where it was 1 day on, 2 days off. And he basically wanted to distinguish the difference between the days on and the days off and the days in between, and collected phenomenal research. And he kind of held on to it for some time until he started noticing and hearing that a lot of people in Silicon Valley, Steve Jobs, these huge influential people driving companies forward, were actually microdosing and leadership team board, to bring these innovative ideas to market. And so he ended up going on the Tim Ferriss podcast, and microdosing blew up. And this was about 4 years ago now at this point. And that's where it just blew up. It started to go mainstream. And a lot of people were now viewing it so much different than they were in the 50s when, we were macrodosing or we were tripping, or it was a completely different experience until it was a controlled substance and it was shut down, and the war on drugs and everything along those lines. But now today, people are realizing and hearing, and the clinical trials and the data and the research on microdosing specifically, how healing these medicines really are, and how we actually can work at a 1/10 to a 1/20th of what's considered a therapeutic dose on a very sub-perceptual level, and have these powerful experiences, whether it's, for therapeutic healing or, peak performance and creativity and driving innovative ideas and business forward. So there's so much that is here today. And the story of how microdosing is, now in modern society, it's not just this mainstream experience or modality that just popped up. This has been around for many years, and it just took some time for it to make it more mainstream.
I want to say that I don't have total recall of what the conversation was, but I do remember very specifically listening to that Tim Ferriss episode a few years ago. And one thing that stood out for me in all of that is just how important mushrooms are to our whole global ecosystem. I remember that part of the conversation and how, it's like bees, it's like the significance of mushroom spores and mushrooms to our whole entire ecosystem is like, it's a big deal. And so it was a very interesting what I took away from that. Again, going back to, my youthful days where macrodosing and tripping was really the thing about it, and then having it and understanding it evolution to now. But when you talk about the experience, and so you're I don't know what you call, I don't want to call it a cure, but you're supporting or helping individuals get through a whole list of things that are happening with us, mentally, emotionally, whatever that might be. But I guess the question is that if I say, okay, well, microdosing and I've got anxiety, am I going to go down a specific path, or is there something I read with that to guide me through that? Or am I just kind of throwing the spores to the wind, so to speak, and microdosing on mushrooms and hoping my anxiety gets cleared up? Like, what is the thought process, or is there a process to that? Whether it be, I'm using anxiety as an example, but it could be anything, I guess.
Yeah. So what I would say with that is, can you microdose and have a great experience and receive the benefits and have a good outcome without any guidance or anything along those lines? Yeah, sure, you can. But what we see, and what the data, and even from a coaching perspective or a guiding perspective, when you pair that with microdosing with a clear intention ahead of time and clear goals and an idea as to what you want to create and what you want to experience with microdosing, to use the example of anxiety, like, yes, I want to heal or alleviate my anxiety. Okay, well, what within that do you actually want to experience? How do you want to heal your anxiety? Like specific goals for that journey. What we find is that when you pair it with coaching or you pair it with support, that it expedites the experience. It expedites the outcomes that you are here to receive. And ways that we do that is through education, of course, like you touched on. So we have here at Golden Rule, we have a ton of education. We have a quiz that somebody could take to even get clear on, the product that would best support them from the get-go. And then we have a 30-day program that we run, which is an experience that we guide people through, teaching them exactly how to microdose, specifically with the dosing. That's about 95% of the experience, is you want to find the dose that feels good for you, which is very individualized. You want to understand the days that you're going to microdose, which we also teach in that program. And then you want to understand how to actually work with the medicine to receive the optimized benefits and outcomes, which we also teach in that program. That's just one way. We have another, offering where it's a self-guided course where you're like, hey, I don't want to go into a group program, but I want to do something more at home, and I can learn that way and I can get fully educated. That's an amazing option for you to explore as well. All that to say, yes, pairing it with support and education will night and day be a beautiful experience for you.
So, and I want to add to that real quick, though.
Yeah.
I do want to say, when I first started microdosing, I didn't have any guidance. And so, and I have worked through so much, and microdosing helped me a ton. But the biggest part of it is people really understanding that they need to set an intention with it. Mm-hmm. And that is truly the key to it, as well as they need to be consistent with it. And those are the two biggest keys, is consistency and setting intention. But the intention piece really goes with the science behind it and how it works in our brains and our bodies, and understanding the rewiring that's happening in the mind. So, setting that intention piece is key. But I also want to say that, I mean, I feel like I'm a living example of, as long as you give it that intention, you absolutely can see results. Guidance just 10x's it.
So walk me through this a little bit. You know, when we think about, when you're using the term microdosing, so I'm operating from an old story of hallucinogenic, you know, and having a great time and tripping on, you know, mushrooms. So when we used to refer to it as clean fun, you know, it's a plant, it's grown, it's natural, it has to be good for you at some level, right? So whatever story we were telling ourselves back then. But I would expect some, like literally, if I took mushrooms, I would expect an outcome called hallucinations, good laughs, good fun, all the things that came with it. If I'm microdosing, am I still having an expectation of a particular feeling or a visual, or what's happening? What should I be expecting in my brain if I'm microdosing?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So when we think of microdosing, kind of like I shared before, it's considered 1/10 to 1/20th of what would be a therapeutic or a tripping sort of experience. And so we're talking very subperceptual, subintoxicating, non-hallucinogenic are all some terms that are referenced with microdosing. Whereas Rachel shared, it's these tiny amounts of medicine or a substance that you're working with throughout the week. Usually with mushrooms, we see 3 to 4 times a week. With LSD, 2 to 3, maybe 4 times a week. And it's more gradual versus all at once. So you're receiving the benefits at a slower pace, but over a longer period of time, which is really incredible for a lot of people that maybe don't want to go and sit in one large journey and have a full-blown experience. That's amazing in so many ways. But it's a much more gentle experience that people can have. And so in terms of what people experience or what you might feel, that is very different than a macrodose or a tripping hallucinogenic experience, is more presence, feeling more open, feeling more creative, feeling more present. I think I said that already, but getting more in touch with your emotions, really slowing down. And a lot of this really depends on what medicine you're working with, what product you're working with, because they do bring in slightly different experiences. And all of this is really possible because of what's happening in the brain with our neuroplasticity, what's happening with the new neural pathways that are being created, and then also the execution of our current pathways that are being cleared out to essentially get rewired. And so when we talk about things like, anxiety or depression or, a block within your creativity, usually we're kind of stuck in a certain pathway in the brain, and we're almost on this hamster wheel experience with that one pathway that's just on repeat, and it's on a cycle, or we feel stuck, and there's no other option for that pathway to really go down in the brain. All of a sudden, when we're working with psychedelics like psilocybin or LSD, the regions of the brain are firing off. They're communicating between the left and the right. The neuroplasticity is allowing our brains to become more malleable, more plastic, which really just means that we're more adaptable and receptive and open to making changes. And so all of a sudden these new pathways are forming, and that one that we were stuck on now has these options of other experiences and thought patterns to go down. And that's where we're seeing these whole new perspectives. And when you have a whole new perspective around something that feels very anxiety or stress driven, or, an experience that's creating the outward lived experience reality of depression, all of a sudden you're viewing that differently. That is so healing for people. And that alone just opens up this whole new way of living, thinking, being. And it's like, okay, that's happening in the lived experience. How do we then take this integrated opening and apply it into our lives so that we don't go back into that same experience, after we're microdosing or, down the road? And that's just as valuable of the experience of microdosing, is making sure that you're integrating it with new, healthier patterns and, ways of living and modalities and things like that.
So when you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is that a lot of this is literally rewiring your brain to some degree. I mean, the neural pathways are opening up that weren't open before. You're going down a different kind of, you're thinking differently. You're being, in some cases, creative, or you're observing your life. Maybe you're self-reflecting differently than you would have self-reflected having not microdosed. Would that be a fair statement, or some version of that? Yeah.
Absolutely. And can we create neuroplasticity, not microdosing? Yes, we all can, but microdosing accelerates that process in a way that allows you to view it completely different, because of what's happening in the brain and the neurobiological system.
So work with me here a little bit, and just me being not very smart and trying to figure all of this out. If I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, to me, this is and I'm going to be a little bit of the devil's advocate in this, and you're taking this outside substance and you're adding it. So what's the difference between, I don't know, smoking a joint or having a shot of something, alcohol? What is the fundamental difference? Some people have a glass of wine or a shot of whiskey to kind of get rid of anxiety, or, somebody might smoke a joint because they just got to chill out. What is the fundamental difference in that? There are all of these things that we're adding to our life. What I'm hearing in this is this can have real change, create real change, versus masking it with a drink and or smoking a joint, and then it comes back and you redo it. Are you following that train of thought, or am I totally off the rails here?
Totally. Yeah, totally. And I would say, one, it's not addictive. Two, there's incredible data and research from really valuable, incredible institutions showing that this is establishing all the things that I just talked about with the science, the neuroplasticity, everything along those lines, the rewiring. So those are some two highlights, but I'm going to throw it over to Rachel because I know she has a great response.
Well, I guess my question would be, is drinking the glass of wine actually getting rid of your anxiety? Mm-hmm. And that's something I really would like people to sit with. Yeah. Because ultimately smoking a joint or drinking a glass of wine is doing is it's numbing you in some way, shape, or form. So you're not actually getting rid of your anxiety. You're actually just covering up the emotion that you're feeling. And this goes for, drinking alcohol, specifically smoking pot, to taking an SSRI and different medications like that help people with depression and anxiety. Mm-hmm. They ultimately, what they're doing is they're blocking the emotion. They're numbing you in some way. Yeah. The difference is that psychedelics are going to essentially be the complete opposite. They're going to bring your emotions to the surface. You are going to feel the emotion. But the reason that is exactly what you need in order to move past that loop that you're living in and get out of that emotion is you need to release it from your body. So it's bringing something to the surface so you can become an awareness of it and you can release it from you. And at the same time, rewiring those neural pathways so that you can have a different experience next time. So I would say big difference in how they're responding in your body. It also, I would say taking mushrooms could maybe be uncomfortable for some people at first because they are so used to numbing that when it's bringing these things to the surface to being released, it can feel uncomfortable. But that's why microdosing is so beautiful, because it really does it in such a subtle way, in such a softer way, where in a macro dose, why it is so uncomfortable for people, in especially in a therapeutic realm, is it is going to bring all of those emotions all at once to the surface and make you look them in the face and deal with them so that you can surrender them. And that oftentimes is way too much for people. Like it is overwhelming for people. Whereas again, microdosing is offering that in a much more subtle way.
So so it's interesting is, again, I'm working from a baseline of a story from many, many years ago, like so long ago that I almost forgot that at some point in my life, somebody might have referred to me as an acid head. Like there was, when I was a young man, LSD and mushrooms, pot were all part of normal for me. But to your point, so here's the question I ask is that I go back in my memory of those times, where I was doing LSD or I was doing mushrooms and having fun with my friends, and we were doing them laughing and all the things, we were brilliant. When you're in it, you're like a genius. I don't know that if I look back, I don't know that there's a reflective that if I look back and go, oh, I had an epiphany while I was, high. I don't, I think we were probably too young to even think in those terms. But to your point, in the wrong environment, being off the charts in terms of the hallucinogenics or whatever you did was really overwhelming. Like you had a better, if you weren't experienced with what was going on in your outside world and you were high in that environment, it was bad news. Like you were really pushed to deal with it. So my question, I guess, in all of that, and I'm going to investigate that a little bit more through this conversation because it's really kind of fascinating for me. So the microdosing is just incremental chunks of macro. So in other words, that's how I'm hearing it. So in other words, what you're doing in a macro dose is the same as what you're doing in a micro dose, although you're breaking it down into smaller bite-sized pieces so that you're not hammered with it and it's a thing that you do over time. Am I articulating that correctly? Is that the right thought process?
You are. I think that's a great way to say it. Oftentimes, depending on what the person needs to work through, but oftentimes somebody could do a macro dose and hopefully a guided macro dose where they're going to possibly get the same results that somebody would get over 30 to 90 days of microdosing. And so, yeah, it's elongating the process, but in a much more comfortable way. So you got it.
So it's interesting. I'll just share a quick story. So it was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago that I realized that you could buy mushrooms, like you could buy hallucinogenics and you could go online and buy these things. And they were actually saying, if you really want to, go off the charts versus just go in lightly, here, go buy these. And I actually bought some mushrooms because an old friend of mine and I were chatting about it. We were reminiscing back in the old days. And then anyways, they're still in my cupboard and we've never done them because we always thought, man, we just never, but I never looked at it. I looked at it as a good time, not as a therapeutic thing. When what you guys are putting here is that there is some therapeutic kind of benefits to actually going on this journey and looking into it. So I'm going to be a little bit long-winded here for a minute, is that when we look at alcohol, so years ago, a friend of mine acknowledged that he was an alcoholic. I went to AA with him. He had gotten charged with driving under the influence. And I went to this course with him, and the instructor at the front of this course, said, "Why do you drink?" And everybody goes, "Oh, I like the taste." And they had all sorts of reasons for it. And ultimately he said, "No, you drink because you have a shift in your physiology." Mm-hmm. And he goes, "Got nothing to do with taste." He goes, "I don't care." He says, "People go, well, I just enjoy great wine." And he says, "That's all true." But he said, "Do not negate. I don't care if it's, a 5-ounce glass of wine, your body, you have a physiological shift. And that's why people actually drink. Now they can enjoy it and they can enjoy the taste. But if you didn't enjoy the taste, you had the same drink, it has that physiology, that shift in physiology." But to what we were talking about earlier, it's just a shift in physiology. And what you're suggesting and what you're saying is with mushrooms in this case, or LSD, which I literally didn't even know that was a thing anymore, which is so fascinating. What you're saying is that this becomes therapeutic in that it actually can change your wiring, but it can also change your disposition. There's revelations to be had, maybe. I don't know. So why is somebody coming to you? Give me a case study. Maybe that's a way I want to approach this, because I really want people to understand that, this is not new. It's relatively new, but I mean, to your point, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have benefited from it. So can you give me a case study? Why would somebody go, "Gosh, I'm so glad to hear about this"? Like, because I've got what?
Oh my gosh, the list is endless. Quite honestly, I'm like going through all of our testimonials. I mean, we receive testimonials every single day from people, but it's always different in what it is. So, I mean, a lot of, we see a lot of veterans, PTSD, depression, anxiety. working with people getting off of their depression medications and transitioning into using psychedelics in that transition, ADHD, but also people who are just using it for wellness, people who are looking for more creativity, more focus, who are looking for more empathy, because ultimately it's a heart opener. But it really is in a therapeutic aspect, all of those, you know, it really is them looking to live a more elevated life in some way, shape, or form, and to feel better in some way, shape, or form. And I would say that is the massive difference compared to how psychedelics were explored previously to how they're being explored now. It really is in the space of wellness and therapeutics. So it really is around people working with them in intention. And I will say that in hearing your stories is one of the massive differences, because I also have similar stories to you of how I used them when I was younger and my experiences with them. And the biggest difference now is the intention of why people are using them. And then that ultimately goes into the experience that they receive from them.
Yeah.
So tell me, and I got so many questions. I don't even know where to go. I'm struggling. I got so many questions. I love this topic.
I love it. I love how much you love this topic.
But I'm thinking about, when we, to validate what you're talking about, I think about ayahuasca. Now, I've never done ayahuasca, but I've had many, I shouldn't say many, I know of people, and I know people who have done ayahuasca, had a fabulous experience with it, a couple who didn't, but that, so it's like, but that changed them forever. I mean, they literally kind of rewired something and came to whatever epiphany they came to and realization that they came to. My question, I guess, I don't care if it's ayahuasca, in this case, it's mushrooms or LSD, and I want to know more about the LSD side of it. But I think about when it comes to therapy, are we really getting to the source of the issue? Are we getting to the source of PTSD, anxiety, depression? The creativity part of it, I get, because, when I go back and I reflect on those times, there was lots of creativity for sure. And lots of fun in all of that creativity. But are we, again, just looking at a different way to mask what we're dealing with? Are we really getting to the source of that anxiety or that PTSD as an example?
I think there's always like this shadow subconscious aspect of it that's present. And we all have a choice to go into those deeper aspects, such as like the root of where it's being established and created from. And a lot of times, if you think of why people look at psychedelics for a lot of this healing, is because they know somewhere, or we know somewhere within us, there's a desire to change. There's a desire to perceive something differently. There's a desire to understand, why is this pattern still showing? Why am I going for the same type of relationships? Why am I unfulfilled in this career and I can't figure out, why I can't figure out, one, what I want to do with my life, or two, why there's so much fear of even making that change. All of these experiences and thoughts and beliefs are originated from something, a belief that we created about ourselves, amongst childhood, or an experience that deeply impacted us. Anything along those lines. And so when people start to look at, okay, I want to work with psychedelics so that I can understand that part of myself more deeply, there typically is some sort of reason as to why that's not here already, or in terms of why I don't understand that part about me yet, or now, or where that comes from. Why can't I do this on my own without psychedelics? Or I am in therapy, but I haven't been able to go that deep into whatever the thing is. And so what we find with psychedelics, whether it's ayahuasca or even on a subtle experience with microdosing, is we start to peel back those layers of what might feel very subconscious. Like maybe you know there's something, but you're unaware of where it's coming from. That's one way. Another way is you know that it's there, but you don't want to look at it. You don't want to go into it because it's inconvenient. You don't have the time for it, whatever the reason is. Or you don't feel safe to go into it. Like there's so many reasons as to why. But when we create the space to go into an experience with plant medicine, all of a sudden that becomes a mirror for the things that are present within us. It's amplifying what is within you that needs to be looked at and resolved and established. And because of the connection that we experience with plant medicine, with the intelligence of the medicine, the earth-based medicine, the spirituality aspect of it is huge. All of a sudden, we're more connected to ourselves, to nature, to God. A lot of people will reference, and we soften. And the things that are big deals or are really scary or have a lot of resistance around them, all of a sudden, we don't have that same perspective around it anymore. We don't see it. It's like, oh, wow, this thing was such a big deal, but it's really just not. And when we put those walls down, we're more open and there's more accessibility to go into the root of, oh, wow, that's where that's from. That's how I've been viewing it this whole time. Wow. And then you reinstall new ways around it or new thoughts.
You know, something that showed up for me as you're speaking there is an understanding of, you know, back in the olden days when I was doing that, it was really recreation. It was fun. The whole intention was to get high, to have fun hallucinating, to do all of those things. What you just kind of described in all of what you say, what I heard you say in all of this is that if somebody's on this journey of self-discovery, you know, like my life is around being on a journey of self-discovery, you know, to be the best version of my limited self. This also becomes a bit of it becomes a tool. It becomes something that, oh gosh, if I'm on this journey and I'm really trying to unpack what's next for me, you know, I might hire a coach. I might hire somebody that knows what questions to ask and can kind of guide me. You know, maybe that sounds like a wellness coach or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but this is another way to kind of open up. It becomes literally therapeutic for somebody who's on that journey. So it's not, I think that's a key part of it. This isn't recreation in that sense. It is also somebody who has a desire to know more about themselves, learn more about themselves, and whether that's coming to a solution around this PTSD that I really think that I'm struggling with, or anxiety as an example, depression, that's somebody who's saying, I'm aware that I have it. I don't know what's causing it. I want to get in. And this is maybe an avenue into that journey, and also a way to get past.
Yeah.
That's how I heard a little bit of what you said anyways.
Yep. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I also want to shed light on that there is this whole therapeutic avenue that we're speaking about with, you know, working with psychedelics and all the benefits that are available within that experience. And recreationally with intention can be just as valuable and is so necessary for many people as well. I mean, think of somebody who maybe has like social anxiety, for example, right? And they have friends over, and the setting, we haven't talked about that, is set up. The environment is created with people that are safe and you want to be around. And all of a sudden there's a lot of, you know, communication happening, and maybe there's dancing or there's music, and you're microdosing, for example, that can also change someone's perception in such a valuable way. So I think the reason why we're touching on the therapeutic and the wellness aspect so deeply is because of where psychedelics have been and where we are today, and the journey that we've been on from the 50s until now as to the therapeutic approaches, where all the research is coming from. They're not researching recreational use of psychedelics. They're researching the therapeutic use, because that's what's driving the movement forward, and that's what we need.
Is it being I guess I don't know if the word is right, is prescribed. So is kind of modern day psychologists, for example, are they saying, you know, this might be something you want to consider? Are they recommending it to patients? Not that I'm just looking at it from a credibility point of view, not that I, you know, endorse psychologists, psychiatrists. That's not what it's about. I'm just asking, is it mainstream in that regard?
Yes, absolutely. So there actually are, in fact, many physicians at this point who are referring a lot of people to work with psychedelics because they're now educated on the alternative holistic medicine essentially that is being utilized versus just the pharmaceutical approach. So that's happening very often. Harvard institution, Imperial Valley, Stanford. I mean, there's so many incredible institutions that have research and data and clinical trials at this point. Yeah, Rachel, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's great.
So,
I mean, it is so nice. We do hear people reaching out and they're like, my physician recommended that I, do this. So
let's go. Okay. So when we look at and we think about mushrooms, again, that's nature's world. I live in British Columbia. So, technically magic mushrooms are growing in our back lawns, but I asked the question around, there's the mushroom conversation, kind of good, clean fun. It's growing on this earth. We go back to, and I want to know a little bit about the LSD component of it. That's very, to me, pharmaceutical. I mean, that's having to be produced chemically. What is the difference between the two, and why one over the other, or why in a combination? Where did the LSD come into play here? I mean, gosh, LSD goes back to what, the early 50s when they started playing with it and experimenting with it. Lots of stories around it. So where does the LSD component of it fold into this conversation?
Yeah, so LSD is obviously synthetic. It's made in a lab, whereas to your point, mushrooms are grown from the ground in the earth. And LSD was established by a Swiss chemist, Albert Hofmann, in the 40s. It was discovered. He was in the lab. He was, working on his projects, and it's actually ironic because April 19th is this psychedelic holiday called Bicycle Day. And that day is named after him because he created LSD and was testing his product and took a very large amount, because he had no idea it was LSD at this point, and was riding his bike. And all of a sudden the LSD kicked on in, and he went on the best journey of his life and shared about it, got all his colleagues on board. And all of a sudden here is LSD. And then it wasn't until, going back to, James Fadiman and all the research that was both with LSD and with mushrooms. And so then it started to come mainstream. So when we think of, why would someone maybe work with LSD in comparison to mushrooms, and what's the difference is we find that mushrooms tend to go more into the emotional body. They're more somatic, bringing more things to the surface. Obviously, they're amazing for creativity and focus and productivity. But what we find with LSD is that it is more in the mind versus the body. And so it's very great for productivity, focus, creativity. There's a little bit of a lighter component that comes with it, because sometimes when we're going into the emotional aspect, it could feel a little dense. It could feel a little heavy of like, I got to go look at this thing and I don't always want to. And it also could be really beautiful and joyful at the same time. But we find that LSD tends to keep you more kind of in the head, more analytical, more focus driven. And it's great for, work projects, things along those lines. And what else would I add to that? The benefits in terms of the brain, what's happening with the neuroplasticity and all the things I talked about with the science, very, very similar. But the main difference is the mushrooms are producing more serotonin, whereas LSD is producing more dopamine. They're both producing both, but there's a difference between how much is actually being produced between the two. So if you take someone who's on a certain SSRI, for example, or anxiety or depression, usually there's something chemically in the brain where one of the two are imbalanced. And so it's obviously tuning into that and seeing how this can come in and benefit that specific individual.
So I want to go down a little different path here. I want to just switch gears a little bit, and I want to hear a little bit about why this. How did you get on this business path? What kind of drove you to understanding mushrooms and the therapeutics of mushrooms / LSD on top of that? Like, how did you get here? Like, how are you in this business?
Such a good question. Rachel, take it away.
I'm actually going to let Tiffany answer this because my story is a little bit longer. But Tiffany, I really feel like, has a beautiful story from in her transition. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll take it away. So I have a 15 plus year background in the pharmaceutical world, in the medical world, working the corporate ladder, climbing the corporate ladder, director roles and sales, business development positions, and very unfulfilled in that career at the time. Obviously, I'm not in there anymore, but I have a background of, I was a Division I athlete, very type A, very driven, very self-motivated. Grew up in a very unstable childhood, never met my father in prison, died at a young age, mother in and out of jail, drugs. So that was just the environment that I was in. Ended up living with an adoptive family, and life started to just take its turns in a really positive way. And went to school, went to college, and had a full ride scholarship, did that for 4 years, came back home, and went right into the corporate world. And it was very unplanned. And you take the competitive, athlete in me, it fit and it molded really nicely until I woke up one day and realized, wow, I'm really unfulfilled. I'm stressed. I have so much anxiety. I have symptoms of depression. Like, it was just a whole experience of that being very unfulfilled, and taking the background of the childhood, instability that was coming up at the same time, which tends to come up when things feel uncomfortable or when you're unhappy at a certain area in your life. All these things start to find their way in as to why that is. And that was my experience. And so one thing led to another, where I didn't know anything about psychedelics. I started to, seek therapy and dive into personal development, and all of those things were incredible. But I was also on SSRI medication. I was on Lexapro. I was on Adderall for 6 years. And I knew, going back to what we've kind of touched on, while I was in therapy and in personal development and loved it, and it was so valuable, I wasn't touching the root. I wasn't accessing the main things. We'll put an S at the end of that. And I started to hear about psychedelics. And so this is, 7-8 years ago, not mainstream, not much education, aside from a little bit about James Fadiman. But I did enough education to feel confident to just kind of establish my own protocol, and had access to psychedelics, ended up working with them. And within 3 months, I was off the medication, which was my goal and my intention going into the experience. And not only did that start to provide so much healing, because as we touch on as well, you remove the medication that suppresses, you bring in the microdosing that amplifies and brings things to the surface. Now I'm looking at those areas that the weight that I've been just holding with them. And so then I'm healing them, and I'm doing the work to, develop different experiences and perceptions. And so not only was that completely changing my life, but I also was like, okay, I need to look at my career. This is a big thing that's holding a lot of weight in my life. And so I was so moved by my experience with microdosing, dove deep into the psychedelic world, educated myself, certifications, all those sorts of things, and stayed in the corporate world and started to work with clients, teaching them how to microdose, maybe 3 or 4 of them a month, teaching them how to work with this medicine, how to receive these benefits. And then, eventually I left the corporate world, went back and forth a couple of times of full-time in the work, back into the corporate, did both. But I ended up leaving it full-time, went into just teaching people how to work with this medicine, facilitating it in a lot of different ways. And then eventually took the business background, took the psychedelic background, and merged those worlds together, and started to advise for companies in the psychedelic wellness world, which is where this experience came with Golden Rule. And it's been absolutely amazing.
So all of what you just said totally makes sense, by the way, mapping your journey in my brain around all of it. But I mean, ultimately, you ended up exactly where I'm sure some of your clients, or the reason a number of your clients are showing up, is because you go on this journey of self-discovery, because something isn't working in your life, or you're not feeling whatever you're not feeling, whatever that is, fulfillment, or you're feeling stressed, anxiety. And you go on this journey of understanding, and then you opened up the door. I mean, what happened with you is, in your microdosing journey, you start to have that awareness of how your childhood traumas played into what was going on in your life today. And you took your corporate background education, and you started bringing it all together. But it all started with you going, okay, something's not working here for me, and the realization that you had. And good for you. I mean, it's interesting that, given your background as a child, lots of trauma in there. And I mean, we all have trauma. It doesn't matter whether our parents went to prison or not. It's all a version of, it's all our story anyway. So I love that aspect of it. And you brought it together. So it's kind of interesting to watch and see how that journey unfolded for you. And I totally get it. And then that would be opening up the discovery of self, and the, the history, the traumas, and all the things, and working through it. That's very, very cool. I love that. Rachel, you can't get away without sharing whatever your story was.
Well, yeah. So my story is similar, different. What's so interesting is, like you said, we all have trauma. We all have things that we have to work through. It doesn't matter. No one gets away without, having that.
Yeah, we don't. And by the way, if you have kids, you're screwing them up anyway. So just, you're fine. They're going to have their traumas.
Exactly. They're going to have their traumas too.
It doesn't matter.
So, but I actually come from a background. I was a heroin addict from the time that I was 15 to 20. I was homeless during that time. When I was 20, I had a massive, basically awakening, a death or change moment. When my boyfriend passed away of an overdose that I had been with the whole 5 years in that addiction. And so it led me to really a deep transformation. I sold what I could sell to get a one-way ticket to Hawaii. And I told myself when I got there, I'd never use again. And I didn't. But what's interesting about transformation, and when you change your life, oftentimes you think, oh, I'm just going to change and everything's going to be, perfect or easier or whatever. But a lot of times when we do that, it oftentimes gets harder before it gets easier. And that really, for me, really came through because I needed to create a whole new identity. I didn't know who I was outside of being a homeless heroin addict. That's who I knew myself to be. So I, create a new identity, figure out honestly how normal people interact with each other, because in very pivotal times of life, when people are learning that, I was doing drugs and living a very different life. And so a friend asked me to go. Well, she wasn't a friend yet. We were creating this friendship, and I wanted to create a friend, have a healthy friendship. She invited me to go to the gym and walk on the treadmill. And so I went because I desperately wanted a friend. And we went and walked on the treadmill and had a great conversation. And, wouldn't you know it, I left feeling so much better. And I kept going back and I kept going back. And I really had the most profound experience after I left a cycling class. The instructor turned the lights down and the music up, and everybody in the room, just the energy's just going and going. And it was just, it was contagious. And I went with it. And I was on cloud 9 when I left. My endorphins were, all the way up. I got in my car, rolled the windows down, driving home. And I thought, whatever this is right here, whatever this drug is, and I didn't even need to take a drug, whatever this is, I'm going to bring this to the world. And that really became my mission in life, to impact the masses in the joy of wellness. And so I went on that mission. I went back to school. I started working in the fitness industry. I worked in the wellness fitness industry for 15 years. And, different things from owning gyms to working with Chris and Heidi Powell from ABC Weight Loss Edition. We helped thousands and thousands of people around the world, to starting my own online coaching company, to creating at that time Colorado's largest fitness festival. And ultimately what I realized through my journey of entrepreneurship. I always say, start a business, because it'll teach you more about yourself than anything else. It'll be one of the greatest awakenings of your life, because you are going to see aspects of yourself that you didn't even know were there. And so that really was true for me. I had physically overcome my addiction, but mentally and emotionally, I had so much to work through, of why I became an addict in the first place. And all of that came back arising for me. It all came back for me. It all said, you know what, you have so much to work through still. And it was when I stepped into leadership that it really was shown. And so when I was doing Colorado's Fitness Festival, I had this huge team. We rented the first festival we ever did. We rented out a huge stadium, shut down. We rented out the new Fort Collins Stadium, brand new built, shut down all the streets around it, and had thousands and thousands and thousands of people attend. And it was incredible. But when we got to the end of that event, I turned to my team and I said, let's go again. And every single one of them said, no, thank you. And it wasn't because the event wasn't great. It was because me as a leader, I had so much work to do. All my fear, all my pain, all my shame, all came to the surface in how I was showing up in leadership. And what really led me to doing a lot of work on myself, because it was like this mirror. It was like, okay, here we are. And I knew that I needed to do a lot of work on myself. And so I, went down the road of ton of self-development and became a master of neuro-linguistic programming, and just became fascinated of how we can rewire our minds, how we can rewire ourselves into ultimately whatever we want to be. And so that led me into psychedelics. And as I got led into psychedelics, I started microdosing. It really started to shift things for me. I started to become so aware of all the things that I hadn't been aware of before. And so when I became aware, I was able to create shifts in those things. And as I started to create those shifts, I really became aware that I really didn't want to work in the fitness industry anymore. That I really wanted to help people in this way. And so I went on an ayahuasca journey. And in that ayahuasca journey, it was really shown to me that I was to be the bridge to help everyday people, everyday, honestly, I'm a 41-year-old mom of 2 girls living in the suburbs, right? How do I help the other soccer moms also feel safe to utilize this medicine? Because in the past, it's been just a lot of the time, the way it's brought across is so weird. It's not connective to people, How do I show them that this is a beautiful wellness tool, something that is very transformative, and help them feel safe to utilize it for their own lives? And so that's really how I got into it, and really what my mission then became. And now that's what it is. It's really just helping everybody feel comfortable to utilize this incredible medicine that's been around for eons and eons and eons, long before us, and utilize it to really elevate their own lives. And
So such great stories, by the way. I love it. I love the fact that, you came through, you faced that adversity, you pivoted, you had that moment of self-discovery, or that, I guess, those moments where you start to realize this isn't for me. A couple of questions that I have around it. First off, often on my podcast, I ask the question, entrepreneurship, is it nature or is it nurture? And, both of you is like, okay, well, it was your entrepreneurial accidents that showed up for you guys in this, and that you pivoted to take it on, be that entrepreneur. In sharing your story, I think you made a comment along the lines of, being an entrepreneur, because it will test you. It'll kind of move you and do what you need to do. But, you had obviously that youthful life where you went down this road of addiction and then came out of it. You came out the other side better for it. So in other words, that journey that you took got you where you are. And the same, could be said, of course, with Tiffany. I just find that interesting. But Rachel, just back to the comment, because of your previous addiction, were you worried about well, hold on, what are you talking about? I'm going to be doing something that's a hallucinogenic. Were you nervous about that at all? Did that come up for you?
You know what? I do get asked that all the time, and I get why that is definitely a question. It wasn't, because I really was coming at it from a therapeutic aspect from the very beginning. So it really never felt any different to me. Yeah.
I get that. And I only ask the question, if you talk to an alcoholic, their comment is, 1 is too many and 100 is not enough. That goes back. So they're afraid to go down that path again for whatever reason. There was a recent comment that somebody made And the statement was along, that we say that we have this bad habit or an addiction. And in the terms of a habit, he didn't say this for addiction, by the way, but he did say it for habit, which was, and I went, oh, that's very true. He says, we say we have these habits and we can't break these habits. And he goes, the minute you're aware of a habit, it's no longer a habit, it's a choice. By the nature of the word habit is doing something that you're not aware that you're doing. And I've never checked the actual meaning of the word, but as soon as he said, no, it's not a habit, as soon as you recognize it as a habit, it's then a choice. So if you're choosing to do something, and I went, okay. And as you were speaking, I'm thinking, I wonder how that applies to the term of addiction. Are we addicted? Because there is a physiological that you go through, and to the degree I understand, any addiction to a substance, your body goes through a process of going, okay, I'm not having this anymore. That's a little different conversation, I guess. So all of this to say, you've come to this place now in your life where you've got this medicine, you've got this understanding of how it can work and how it can change lives. Is there a pattern that you're seeing in terms of age group who's showing up? Is there a demographic that you're saying, a lot of these 30-year-olds they've got whatever they've got going on in their life and all the challenges, because it's harder for 30-year-olds than it is 60-year-olds. And, there's lots of stories. Or is it, 55-year-olds that are waking up and going, oh, frick, I just realized that my whole life's a shambles. Like, is there a place that you're seeing people enter?
I mean, really, we're seeing people from 30 to 50, I would say, is the age range that we help the most. Interestingly enough, people in their 20s, this doesn't feel foreign to them. They already are so in the realm of inner work and using psychedelics therapeutically and aware. It's interesting to see. It doesn't feel like an off conversation for them. It seems totally normal to them. But we more see that we help people 30 to 50 because essentially, again, being that bridge, we're helping them break the basically what they've been programmed into around what this actually is. And so typically, we really see that come in a lot because we are, I guess they feel like it's a safe avenue for them to explore it.
Is this different than, because I'm seeing some stuff around mushroom coffee. Do you guys have a coffee product as well?
We don't, but those are more functional. So those are going to be more functional mushrooms.
So when you look at what you're doing, okay, so give me a context for it. Now, you as a company, do you hold yourself as a provider of a specific product, or do you hold yourself as a therapeutic, business that supports you on your journey of, figuring shit out? Like, how do you, what is when you think about the context or the model that you have for a business, can you define it a little tighter?
Yeah. So we are a products-based company, right? But what we're doing, as Rachel shared, is so much more than that. We're a product-based company that is teaching people how to intentionally and effectively work with the medicine that can absolutely optimize and elevate the way that they live their life. There's many different pathways as to how you can journey through that experience, such as what I shared with different courses and different programs and different ways of working with this medicine to receive that support. But ultimately, it's a tool, it's a wellness, modality, it's a therapeutic resource for you, depending on what your individual need is. And we really stand on providing that solution for you.
So I want to go down this path. Like, I want to go and start this journey. Okay, so what do I do? Well, how do I know where to start? If I go on your website and I go, okay, I want to buy some stuff. How do I decide?
Yes. So go to goldenrollmushrooms.com. You're going to see that you can take a quiz. It's a pretty straightforward quiz, and that's going to guide you with certain questions of what you're looking to experience. that's going to take you on a journey of providing insight on what product would be best for you based on your needs and goals. And then from there, you can order the product and have a self-guided experience. Like I said, you can either purchase the course and do that at home on your own. It's just a video course. That's a phenomenal resource for you to learn how to microdose on your own. If you're like, I actually would love support with a live group. We have a 30-day microdosing experience that the next one is going to be launching in May that you can join. And I'm actually facilitating that. Rachel is as well, where we're teaching you how to microdose. We're teaching you how to work with the medicine that you're ordering. Another way is if you're like, I'm not sure if I want to start, but I want to learn more. Maybe you take the quiz, maybe you didn't. But you can sign up for our newsletter and you can join our monthly Q&A calls that I run, where you get all your questions answered. You can start to learn who's involved in the community, which is a huge aspect of it. And you can just learn more about microdosing and see if this is a good fit for you. So we've really set the business up in a way where there's so many options for you to choose from based on everything that you honestly need. If you're curious about it, there's all those pathways that you can join. And if none of those are resonating with you, you can email us at hello@goldenrulemushrooms.com and ask any questions to us. And I'm usually in there responding to all of our customer service emails. And so many people do that so often. And that also is a really powerful, great place to start.
So that's great. Thank you for that. I guess one of the questions I might have for you, Rachel, you're leaving the gym, you're high on endorphins, you're driving down the street, and I got to share whatever I got to share with the world. I've got to come to it. Is in that moment in time, or through that phase of whatever journey, through that phase of your journey, you're literally kind of coming to who I am, and am I being true to myself? And Tiffany, you had that in the corporate world. So if somebody, as a coach myself in some of the work and bodies of work that I've done, is that I come across people all the time and they go, I don't know what I want to do. I just know that I don't like my life. I don't like what I'm doing. I hate my boss, or I hate my whatever. There's some form of their life that they're really dissatisfied with. And they go, but I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know where to go. I got, it's just nothing. So I just keep doing what I'm doing because I don't know. Like, if somebody was having that dialogue, and I'm sure that you've experienced that, you've heard that version of that somewhere in your own work. Is that a point of entry? Is this microdosing might be the journey that you go on to get to who you really are, and on that discovery of being your truest self. And this could be a path that you go down. Would that be one of the reasons that you might microdose?
Absolutely. Sign up.
Get on that wagon.
Not to go deep into it, because I know we're wrapping up here, but think of my story, what I just shared. I was at a point where I was trying to figure out what the heck to do with my life. I had, the background that I had. I was doing the work, and I was asking those same questions. Where do I go from here? And it truly was when I started working with psychedelics, microdosing, that opened up this whole new perspective of identity, of what it's like to hear my own voice, what it's like to get in touch with my emotions and what I really want and desire out of my life. Truly, these medicines helped me discover who I am and who I want to be and the path that I want to take for my life. And we see that left and right, whether it's someone sharing a testimonial in an email, it's someone in our program, it's someone in our course, it's someone in our Instagram messages, truly sharing the experiences that they're having with these medicines, shifting their life because of those reasons that you just asked.
Is it fair to say that, because you said something earlier on that kind of struck with me, is that if you create the right environment, so you set the right intention, you're with a group of friends, a group of people that you trust, knowing that you're in a safe environment, and you say, okay, I just want to, because I remember, as young men and having lots of fun. I mean, we were solving world problems like you'd never heard before, but of course nobody is keeping notes, and that was never the intention. It was just to have fun, but there was a lot of creativity that happened in it. But I can see that in that environment, if you're setting that intention and you've got the right people. But the key to that is, back in the days where I was doing it, ultimately we were very impaired. We were having fun and it was great. Microdosing, I think, is the key there, is that you're not impairing yourself. And I think that might be some of the story that people might be telling themselves is that I would not have control, like I'm losing control. Would that be a thought process, Tiffany?
Yeah, so that is absolutely a thought process that people have, because a lot of our control and a lot of our fear come in of, I don't want to trip, or I don't want to be that person that completely loses it because of some of the horror stories that maybe we've heard of psychedelics and the hallucinations, and that you're, not going to be able to drive a car or take your kids to school or hop on work meetings. The purpose of working with such a micro amount is so that you are fully still in control. You're fully present. In fact, I'm microdosing right now and I feel great. I feel grounded. I'm having this amazing podcast interview, and I'm really present. So that's just an example. And so a lot of times where that fear is established from is control, wanting things to go a certain way. A lot of fear around not wanting to change, having the desire to change, but the limiting factors coming in saying, no, you don't deserve that. Nope, you're not going down that path. We're going to keep you over here. We're going to keep you where it's safe and cozy. And so often why I love microdosing is because people start to notice that part soften. And I want to share something, really quickly, is that fear response, that control response, that loud, active, limiting voice that we all hear time to time is a part of our brain called the amygdala, this tiny almond-shaped part of the brain that's very loud. It also, another part could be like the default mode network that we all have as well. Those parts of the region of the brain are very loud. They're very active. They're those experiences that I just spoke into, where you want something, but it's like, nope, that's not yours. We're not going there. That's scary. Attached to something traumatic, something that impacted you, something that you created the experience and belief around in your body that's not safe. And so that part, the amygdala and the default, start to quiet when we work with these medicines.
Interesting.
That is so effective for people to get that loud ass voice out of the way so that you can move on and move forward with your life.
Well, I love that. I'm glad you brought that up. Well, as we do wind down, I don't know what happened to Rachel. She disappeared. So,
Hi, Rachel. We love you.
We love you anyway.
She had to pick up her children. I think she put in the chat that she
didn't even say goodbye.
I know. I'll say goodbye for her because she is amazing. I'll hold it down for us.
It's all good, Tiffany. So, Tiffany, as we do wind down, however, is there anything that you would want to share that we didn't get to in this? I mean, I could talk about this for another hour, but what is the, is there something that we didn't cover that you want to make sure the audience hears?
Thank you for that question. I think we covered a lot, and we covered the very foundational aspects of this medicine and what it is and what it means and how to work with it for the most part. Obviously, we can get a lot deeper into the how and the actual experience through a lot of options that we shared of how you can get more involved. And I love that we dove into just why people are working with these medicines and the patterns and the root and all those sorts of reasons that make these so valuable and so beneficial. So I think we touched on a lot, and I think we really resourced your audience, and I hope that whoever's listening really received a lot of value from this conversation.
They will receive a ton of value. And, for me personally, as I was listening to you and Rachel share your stories, it was really kind of plays to exactly what it is that, the whole journey of microdosing and understanding mushrooms, LSD, to the degree that we talked about it today. It seems like the natural path. Like you are the poster children for the product that you're selling because of the journey that you've been on. Like you're okay. Well, the reason is, and so I love.
Yeah, we're not just these people that have been so successful and had the golden spoon. And not that anything's wrong with that, but this was something that it was a journey to arrive here, and we all have journey, and we all have a story, and we all have trauma that has impacted us. And to your point of what we've talked about today, we all have a choice, and this choice wasn't handed to either of us. It was something that we had to do the work to really access the fact that this was even on our hearts to share with the world. And if you take my background in corporate, I thought that was my life. That's all I knew until I started to explore myself more deeply. And all of a sudden there's this whole other life that's available. And so, Yeah, I really appreciate that. I appreciate you having us on, and I'm really proud of what we've created.
I love it. Well, listen, thank you for joining me today. And I look forward to, listen, I'll have to give you some feedback because I'm going to go play and do some microdosing and have some
Yay!
fun. So I
Yes, we
appreciate
can't wait.
it. Thanks very much, Tiffany. And say thanks to Rachel.
I will. Yeah. Rachel says thank you, everybody. Thanks for having us.